Volkswagen India may have built its foundations on the shoulders of a handsome hatchback, some practical sedans, but the brand badly needs a mid-size or at least a compact crossover. In fact, they have one now. And that is the reason why all their marketing philosophy, all their marketing communication currently is revolving around this particular body style. They've even coined the term SUVW. In fact, that is to highlight that their newest crossover is cut from the same fabric as the T-Roc, the Tiguan and even the Touareg. It shows in the design philosophy. But honestly, they've been toying with the idea of a Taigun for quite some time now. The first time they showed it to us as a concept was back in 2014, back when I was much larger and the Taigun was much smaller, at least in its concept form. It was a sub 4-meter crossover with a spare wheel strapped to the back of it, much like the EcoSport. But if Volkswagen would have built that car, they would have had to use the underpinnings of the Volkswagen Up, which was the PQ12, or at least make something on top of the underpinnings of the Polo, that was PQ25. But the problem with using either of these two platforms would mean that the vehicle would lack space or it would lack the electronic architecture required for new age features and connected technologies. The answer would be MQB, which was a more advanced, a modular platform, but that would also mean that the costs would be astronomical. So the final answer came in the form of the A0 IN platform, an Indianized version of MQB, which is not necessarily a bad thing because it proves that Indian suppliers can supply components of global quality. At the same time, it's allowed the Volkswagen engineers to make sure that this car has the ground clearance and the suspension travel required for Indian roads. This then, finally, is the made in India, made for India Volkswagen Taigun. You've seen it on many occasions now, from the production-ready concept at the 2020 Auto Expo to the final prototype we showed you a few weeks ago in Goa. So the only details that I'm going to highlight are that it gets the most amount of chrome that you will have ever seen on a Volkswagen sold in India. It has a mixed palette of youthful or elegant colors. I don't like that the GT badge has a different font than the Taigun badge, but I do like how tastefully the lower trims are done up. Most design elements are common across the range and only the headlights and the DRLs differ. The lower end halogens do a good job, but the all LED headlamps look and perform better. And sorry, the only way we can show you that is in a dark tunnel. And finally, in a typical Volkswagen style, the Taigun has a more elegant design compared to its Skoda sibling. But I do hope that they offer an option to have lesser chrome or maybe have a black pack or a black edition. We must address the elephant in the room, the tailgate. Now this seamless strip of LEDs that you see, it essentially is inspired from the more premium brands in Volkswagen's portfolio like Audi and Porsche, and I think it imparts that premium stance here as well. However, I think that this chunky bit is going to sort of polarize buyers. Something sleeker would have been more appealing. But I also think that it will start to grow on you. It's starting to grow on me as well. So maybe as a design element, people might end up liking it. Do let me know, what do you think? What people will certainly like are the boxy and the upright proportions of this car because they lend it a more SUV kind of stance compared to what we've seen on the Volkswagen T-Roc. There's no denying that, like the Kushaq, the MQB platform makes the Taigun appear compact too. But as we established earlier with the Kushaq, the cabin space is comparable to cars like the Creta and the Seltos. The doors open nice and wide, just like the Kushaq, so ingress and egress is not a problem at all. They also have that reassuring thud, which is something that you expect from most European brands, and you get that in this car as well. It sorts of builds the whole idea of quality and that feeling of this being a vault, and that's a good thing. The windows, however, they're just as noisy as what we complained in the Kushaq, so it's more of a component thing than a brand thing. But what I've also noticed is that these windows, especially the rear ones, take a long time to open compared to the front, almost 2 seconds more to open. Now I'm nitpicking, of course, but yeah, this is fairly slow. It takes almost 6.5 seconds if I counted right. Except for the driver's window, the others don't have a one-touch auto up-down, nor do they roll up or down with the key fob. As far as the space goes, well, it's a nice and wide cabin. There's generous shoulder room as well, but it's still good enough only for 2 adults and a kid. 3 adults is going to be quite cramped in here. As far as foot space, knee room or headroom goes, it's very generous. So no complaints there at all. The glass house is exactly similar to the Kushaq too. meaning that kids or shorter passengers will find the window line to be a bit on the higher side. The Taigun too has a stubby sunroof over the front seats and the cabin feels nice and airy. While the lack of a chrome lining on the central AC vents even on the top trim makes them look a bit plasticky, like the scratchy dashboard top, the overall fit and finish of the cabin are otherwise very good. Like the exterior, even the cabin of the Taigun has a very elegant demeanor to it. You can either settle for subtle colors like these, or you can go in a little bit of a hatchback style red paneling that runs across the length of the dashboard. And complementing that sporty or the premium touch, choose your adjective, is this flat bottom steering wheel, which has a switchgear that has a better tactile feel compared to most of its competition. I like this switchgear quite a bit. You also get ambient lighting in either white or red depending on the trim you choose, and you also get a fully digital instrumentation cluster. Called the fully digital cockpit, it is only available in the range-topping trims of either of the engines and shows the speed, the revs, the music and the telephony information in 3 different styles. There's no satellite navigation, neither do you get Google Maps kind of navigation that you find in the virtual cockpit on cars like the Audis. So understand the difference between the digital cockpit and the virtual cockpit. Similarly, you cannot even have the CIGIC maps that are installed on this infotainment or the Google Maps that you would use via the available wireless Apple CarPlay or the Android Auto to display anything on this particular screen. Now, I want to know from you, what do you prefer? Do you want the turn-by-turn navigation or the maps to be displayed on this particular screen, or would you rather prefer having the maps in full screen on this particular infotainment system? What is it that you like? Let me know in the comments below. There are plenty of charging options for everyone in this car, especially on the top end trims. You have at least 4 charging options in the front. You have 2 USB-C ports, you have the 12-volt socket, so you can have a multi-charger if you want, and you also have the wireless charging pad. Similarly, at the rear, you get 2 USB-C ports, so charging gadgets on the go is not going to be a problem for all. In fact, all your gadgets, including maybe your dash cams and a navigation system if you want a satellite navigation system, all of that can be powered right here. As you might have guessed, this is the same 10.25-inch Play infotainment system as the Skoda Kushaq, meaning that you can install apps from its own app store too. It feels a bit like an Android tablet, runs a different skin though to go with Volkswagen's corporate attire, has some cool message screens with German humor, and its form factor isn't the floating type. I'm all for floating type displays. I like them when they're stacked on top of the dashboard because you don't have to take your eyes too far off the road to get a glance of whatever you need on the screen. But at the same time, I quite like how neatly Volkswagen has managed to integrate this particular screen in the dashboard. I think it makes for a very clean design, especially given the fact that you have a minimal switchgear here. The clutter is absolutely not there. It's a nice clean design. I still don't like those AC controls down there, by the way. They still should have been switches. They shouldn't have been the touch type, but I think we'll have to all live with this now. Back to this particular screen, you also can choose or create different profiles. And one feature that I really like about this whole profiles thing is you have a profile called the Valet, which enters the Valet mode. Now, unlike some of the higher end cars, this Valet mode will not restrict the speed or lock out some of the features or lock out the glove compartment, for example. It will not do all of that, but what it will do for you is make a log of all the actions. Like, for example, it will log at what speed the Valet took your car from where to where. It will also log stuff like, did they open your boot, did they open the doors, did they spend time inside the car. It will give you a log of all these actions, and I think that's a very nice security measure to have. Ever since we drove the Karoq, the T-Roc, the Kushaq, we were eagerly waiting to sample this 150 PS TSI engine with a manual transmission. And finally, Volkswagen has given us the chance to do just that. And as you would expect, this is a fun package. It's a very eager engine. We've already talked about it, highlighted that. And now with a manual transmission, it just takes the fun to a new level, especially for driving enthusiasts. Well, I think you're going to love this engine and gearbox combination. Now, the clutch pedal travel, both enthusiasts and commuters will probably complain about it because the clutch pedal travel is quite a bit, and that can sometimes get cumbersome in the city, but not so much because the clutch pedal itself doesn't require too much effort. It's nice and light, so it shouldn't be that much of a problem. As for those of you wondering about torque steer on a manual transmission with this kind of power on a front wheel driven configuration, well, yes, there is a little bit of wheel spin here and there. There is a bit of torque steer when you're around switchbacks. That is the only time when you will really realize it. If you're really not modulated well with your throttle, only then you will realize it around switchbacks. But otherwise, the EDIF takes care of it all. In fact, the EDIF also makes sure that the lines remain tidy. You will always arc a nice and tidy curve through the corners. It will ensure that. It might need a little getting used to because it just feels a little bit sharper than what you would expect of a front wheel drive configuration that's receiving this kind of power. But once you get used to it, you will learn how to enjoy this car. The EDIF will also open up a lot of opportunity because you know that ever since the Polo Cup started in India, enthusiasts have been tuning the Volkswagen cars, the Polos, the Ventos. They've been throwing a lot of horsepower and torque at it. And now with that EDIF, I think you're going to have a lot more fun tuning this particular package from Volkswagen compared to a Polo or a Vento. So even those who are driving enthusiasts keenly looking at this car to maybe bump up the numbers, I think you will be very happy with this. Now, since we are talking about driving enthusiasm, well, I like both the packages, the manual as well as the automatic. Yes, the DQ200, people who still want to crib about the reliability of it can continue doing so, but I think we can put it behind us now. The number of warranty claims about the DQ200 have gone down significantly over the years, so it's not a big matter of worry. So if that's the only thing that's holding you back, let that not worry you, because I've also heard Volkswagen and Skoda be proactive, and they've also replaced transmissions on some of the cars that are out of warranty. So let's put all of that behind us. Purely from the performance angle, or from the performance of the gearbox, I think it's a lovely gearbox. That DSG just it feels lovely. The manual, of course, is the way to go if you're an enthusiast. But if you want more convenience, because you are going to be driving this car primarily in the city, then I think you can still choose the DSG and still be happy with it, because the shift times are really quick on the DSG. Now, why I'm bringing the shift times into the picture is because, especially for roll-on acceleration, with the manual transmission, you might have to downshift sometimes, or you might have to wait for the turbo to kick in, because there is a significant turbo lag under 2500 RPM. There is enough low-end torque when you're driving in city conditions, so much so that you can take off from the second gear. But when it comes to pulling overtakes where you need that roll-on acceleration, if you're under 2500 RPM, you have to wait for the RPM to reach 2500, you have to wait for the turbo to spool up, and then you will make good progress. However, with the DSG, you don't have to wait that long. It does take that brief moment to quickly understand what gear it needs to be in, and it will downshift to that gear, downshift 2 gears if it has to, and quickly give you that overtake, quickly give you that power and torque. So, from that angle, I think the DSG is still the gearbox to go for, because it has everything covered. The convenience of an automatic, the quick shifts that you would want, then there are paddle shifters behind the wheel. So yes, it's down to you to take your pick. I'm really a bit confused between the two, because I can't ignore the convenience of an automatic. At the same time, I can't let go of the joy of those perfect shifts, those perfect clutch and throttle movements. And yeah, you know what I mean. So it's completely down to you what you really want. Or the other way you would want to choose it is again down to the features, because there are certain features that you may not get on the manual. There are certain features that you may not get on the automatic. So you'll have to wait and watch, look for the brochure, see what the variant-wise feature list is like, and then make a buying choice, because probably it will just come down to that, and basically choosing between the convenience of an automatic or the joy of a manual. Now, irrespective of the gearbox you choose with the 1.5 litre engine, the engine will rev to about 6,500 RPM. Just that with the manual, you can hold the revs there if you want. However, with the automatic, once you're in sport mode, that's the only time it will rev all the way to 6.5, but it will not stay there. It will quickly upshift to the next gear to essentially reduce any kind of harm to the engine. Now, when you're really going for it, if you really want those numbers, Volkswagen claims that the DSG will go from 0 to 100 in 9.1, whereas the manual transmission will do it in 9 seconds. In our tests, we managed about 9.8 seconds with the Taigun DSG, and it was 9.7 seconds in the Kushaq. Of course, different test conditions. They're closer to sea level back then. And with the manual Taigun, we have managed about 9.4 seconds. So that's the difference, 9.4 for the manual, 9.8 for the automatic. Now, a lot of you asked us about the NVH level. Some of you complained that the engine is a bit too noisy in the Kushaq. I didn't find it to be too noisy, honestly. And it's almost the same here in the Taigun. I don't have any engine noise to complain about, really. Yes, there are more refined petrol engines in this particular segment, but this one's not something that I would really complain about. In fact, the NVH is pretty good. There are a few pedal vibrations, especially when it goes into the two-cylinder mode. You notice a few pedal vibrations. Otherwise, the operation is quite discreet. You simply get a message on the instrumentation that tells you it's in two-cylinder operation mode. And the only noise that I would probably complain about is the wind noise that you can hear beyond 120 kilometers an hour. But honestly, you're going to hear the beeper a lot more annoyingly than that wind noise, and you can drown out all of this with the beautiful audio system that you have. Now, this is not a branded audio, if that matters to you. Well, this is not a branded audio. In fact, it doesn't even say Volkswagen audio like it did with the Skoda Kushaq. There was Skoda audio written on it, if I'm not wrong. It doesn't get any branding whatsoever, neither from Volkswagen nor from any other brand. But it's a sweet sounding system. We talked about it in the Kushaq as well. It's a sweet sounding system. The only thing that I would want to point out, which is something I forgot while reviewing the Kushaq, the soundstage is in the front of the car. Now, you may or may not like it. You may want the sound to come from where the album art is being displayed, from where the artist information is being displayed. If you are that kind of an audiophile, then yes, you will enjoy this, because the soundstage is always in the front of the car, even when the balance or the fader is set to its central position. And when you start moving it back, it either goes completely back or it's completely in the front. It never feels like it's coming from the center of the car, and that is a difficult feat to achieve anyway. And yeah, here the soundstage is in the front, it's on the dashboard. It almost feels like it's coming from the screen. While the Taigun makes up in the features department compared to the Kushaq, this one too does not get any driving modes for sporty or economical driving. Neither are there any traction control modes for varying terrain, but it does just fine on mild trails and bumpy pathways, since there is enough ground clearance and give in the suspension for the rough stuff. Other little bit that I want to draw your attention to is the cruise control system. Now, there is a cruise control system, of course. There is no ADAS feature on this car, though there is a switch like we had in the Kushaq that suggests that it could be introduced at a later stage, but I really doubt it, because Volkswagen says that it's a more expensive hardware and it may not make any sense for the Indian market. So probably why this feature is here is because of the countries that this car is going to go to. Probably there they might introduce the feature, or maybe it could be a compulsory feature. The level 2 ADAS is compulsory in quite a few countries now. So probably it is for those markets that this switch here exists. But here, I don't think the ADAS is going to come. As for the regular cruise control, it's the typical Volkswagen switchgear, very easy to operate, very easy to understand, very easy to use. The only little thing that I want to draw your attention to is, now in most cars, you can increment the speeds by 1 kilometer an hour when you do short presses. When you do a long press, you can increment the cruise control speed by 10 kilometers in one go. So basically, if you want to set your cruise control to a little under 120 kilometers an hour, you have to make sure that you are manually in that zone between maybe say 115 to 119, and that is when you hit that cruise control switch, because getting a precise 119, for example, is not going to happen with these switches. It will either be 110 or 120. Talking about the suspension, Volkswagen isn't giving out too many details, but they are saying that there are minor tweaks or minor changes between the suspension setup in the Kushaq versus the Taigun. Now, what I have noticed is on the 16-inch wheels, you have a slightly softer setup, a noticeably softer setup compared to the top-end variant that has the 17-inch wheels. The turn-ins feel a lot sharper, the car feels a lot touter with the 17-inch wheels, whereas the one with the 16 has noticeably better ride quality. That little bit of thudding that you probably heard right now is from the 17 inches. In the 16 inches, you don't really hear all that much, and especially when taking sharp bends, you will also feel that it's a little bit squishy compared to the top-end model that is running on the 17s. Now, on that topic, yes, there is a bit of body roll, especially when you're driving around tight switchbacks, or if you're driving on fast-flowing corners, or even in places like here in Rajasthan, where you might have to make sudden lane changes for cows that are sitting in the middle of the road or trucks that are too slow in the fast lane. You know, it doesn't feel unnerving at all. It's all controlled body movements. It is all controlled body roll. But yes, there is body roll. It doesn't feel as taut as you would probably expect of a Volkswagen, especially if you've driven something like the T-Roc, which feels so stiff. But that's actually a good thing, because this is what the customers or the consumers asked from Volkswagen. They wanted the car to be a little softer. They wanted the ride quality to be a little softer. So if you are one of those, then better get a variant that is running on the 16-inch wheels. But if you are the classic Volkswagen customer who wants that taut handling dynamics, who wants that slightly firmer ride, is the 17 inches that you want to choose. Now, when I'm talking about body roll, this is where a bit of the ergonomics also comes into play. The seats, I would have liked a slightly stiffer bolstering on it, because when you are going a little faster, a little hot into a turn, there is a fair bit of body movement, like I said. But because the bolstering is so soft, you tend to move quite a bit in the seat, and that's not a great feeling. It just feels a little too squishy. The seats feel a little too squishy. I don't really like that feeling, especially if you're coming up from a Vento or a Polo. You're bound to feel that these seats are a bit too squishy. It could also be because of the seats that are running these fabric covers. I think the ones that I drove in the morning that had the leather covers, they felt a little bit better. But yeah, overall the cushioning is quite soft. So the leather covers or the leather covers are only going to do so much. And since we're on the topic of seat covers, well, ironically, the top-end variants come with fabric seats. And because they are fabric seats, there's no perforation, and so there is no ventilation function either. They do not have the ventilated seats on the GT variants at all. If you want the ventilated seats, which is a great convenience feature in our climate, you have to settle for the lower variants. That, I think, is a bit of a bummer. Continuing with the ergonomics, one feature that people upgrading from Polos or Ventos are going to miss is adjustable seat belts. I'm not a big fan of these kind of seat belts. I want that adjustability, and unfortunately that is definitely missed on this car. There's no difference to the steering system at all. It feels just as conveniently light as we found in the Kushaq, and on the highway it again leaves you wanting for a little bit more weight, a little bit more heaviness to it. It still has that dead at center feel. Not something that is unnerving, not something that I would really complain about much. It's just a matter of getting used to. What I definitely love is how confident the braking feels, especially on the DSG. The engine braking is brilliant. The engine braking that complements the physical brakes is just brilliant. The way it downshifts quickly to kill that speed, it's astonishing. I really like it. It's very nicely done, and you don't feel any kind of jerks when those downshifts are happening. We've seen on some of the automatics then that when you are braking hard, you can also start feeling the jerks every time that downshift happens. Here you don't feel it at all. It's nice and seamless. So overall the brakes are brilliant. Even on the manual transmission, I like the braking. It's got a nice progressive feel to it. It doesn't feel spongy at all, and that's a very good feeling. There is a long list of safety features on offer too, most of which is standard across the range, the only optional features being the 6 airbags and the low-line tire pressure monitoring system, which will still tell you which tire is running a low pressure. And yes, both these features are available with the 1.5 DSG as well. So to sum it up, the two-pronged approach that Volkswagen and Skoda are taking with this compact crossover segment or the mid-size crossover segment is actually bearing fruit already. That A0 IN is here, and it's showing its gains and its benefits already. In fact, Skoda has just reported a phenomenal 320% growth ever since the Kushaq came out in terms of their sales figures. So between June 2021 and July 2021, 320% growth. That just shows that how eagerly the market was waiting for these robust European crossovers to come out from these two brands. And I think the Taigun is just going to take it forward. Now, going by their global positioning, of course, Volkswagen will have to price the Taigun at maybe 2 to 5% more than the equivalent Kushaq. But are there equivalent Kushaq variants is something that we need to look at, because Volkswagen has configured the car a little differently in terms of the features. For example, like I said, the ventilated seats are not there on the top-end variants. You do, however, get the digital instrumentation. So this is just one of the examples. So we'll have to wait and watch till the launch how Volkswagen manages to really spec all the different variants. They're still trying out a few permutations and combinations is what we are told, and they are trying to get that pricing right. So like I said, 2 to 5% increase over corresponding Kushaq variants is what my prediction is. So you're looking at about 18.2 to 18.5 lakh rupees for the range-topping variant as per my calculation. I don't think they will go further beyond that because they would want to maintain enough gap between the Taigun and the T-Roc. The T-Roc currently starts at a little over 21 lakh rupees. So they would want to keep a gap enough between these two cars. At the same time, they'll also have to leave enough room between the range-topping GT variant with the Taigun and the range-topping variant on the Kushaq, because they have to leave enough space for the Monte Carlo variant of the Kushaq to come out with all these additional features that the Taigun is bringing to the table. So you see, the pricing game is going to be very tricky. I think Skoda went a little bit too optimistic with the pricing, and that is where Volkswagen will be forced to rethink a few things here and there. But I just hope that Volkswagen manages to price the Taigun right, because if I had to choose between the Kushaq and the Taigun at the moment, I think I would side with the Taigun. Of course, we would want to do a proper comparison story between the two to really give you a clear verdict on this. But at the moment, looking at the way it stands right now, I think the Taigun would be my pick, because for this particular price bracket, it gives me that premium feel. It doesn't leave me wanting for too many features, and it sort of justifies that high asking price thanks to everything that we always love about Volkswagens. The way it drives, the build quality, the kind of premium feel that you expect from it, and the overall feature kit is now up to the mark.